welcome to this meeting of Derbyshire Dales Planning Committee, held here in Matlock Town Hall on Tuesday, 14th of January 2025. It's our first meeting of 2025, so Happy New Year to everyone, and I hope it's a healthy one for everyone. Just by way of introductions first, those sitting around this top part of the table, my name's Councillor Peter O'Brien, and I'm chairing this evening's meeting. I'm the Derbyshire Dales District Councillor for the Hathersage Ward. I've got with me our Vice Chair, Councillor Sue Beaufort, on my right here. We've got our planning officers. We've got Sean Robson, Sarah Arbon and Edward Fordin, who are going to introduce the different planning applications. We've got Kay France on my left, who's our Legal Services Manager. And then we have Angela, who's looking after the administration of the meeting to make sure everything's recorded. And we've got Michael sitting over there, who's looking after the audio-visual side of the meeting. With no fire practice planned for this evening, so if you do hear the alarm go off, that tells us that it is a real emergency. Two fire escapes. The one is through the double doors and down the stairs through which you came, and there's another fire exit to my left here. Those members of the public, I'm pleased to see here this morning there's tea, coffee and water available in the corridor outside there, and the toilets, there's a set of toilets down the stairs, and there's a disabled toilet just to the left along the corridor there, so please feel free to use those. When we come to the public speaking aspect of the meeting, just to remind you that the meeting is going out live on the Council's YouTube channel. So if you prefer not to be filmed while you're speaking, please let me know, and we'll turn the camera off for that part of the presentation. So we've got 4 applications to consider this evening, but before we start on those, we've just got 3 or 4 bits of admin to get through. The first of which is apologies for absence. Please, Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor David Burton, apologies. Councillor Joanne Linthwaite to substitute, and Councillor Bob Butcher, apologies.
Thank you. Those are noted. We need to approve, please, the minutes of 3 previous meetings. We'll take them in turn. We had a meeting on the 27th of November 2024. Someone like to move approval of those minutes, please? Councillor Slack. A seconder, please. Councillor Buttle. All those in favour, those who are there, please show. Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's noted, so those are carried. Our meeting on the 10th of December 2024. Yes, Councillor Dobbs, seconded by Councillor Slack. All those in favour, please show. Any abstentions? That's noted and that's carried, thank you. And finally, our meeting on the 12th of December 2024. Councillor Lees, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Dobbs. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Again, any abstentions? Thank you, Councillor Linthwaite. So those are carried. Item 3, do any members have any interests that they would like to declare at this stage? No? That's okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the applications for determination this evening. As I said, we've got 4 to consider. The first of which, item 5.1, the application on Stockholms Road, that has been withdrawn, so we won't be considering that this evening. So the first application is item 5.2. That is in Oker on Willshaws Lane. It's a replacement dwelling, replacement of an existing dwelling with a new dwelling, and associated highway and landscaping works with that proposed development. We have some late representations on this application, so if we just give us members 3 or 4 minutes to have a look through those, please, and then I'll invite members of the public to make their representations. Right, colleagues, if you've all had time to look through that late representation, we've got 3 speakers on this application. The first is Councillor Julie Wilkes from South Darley Parish Council. And as I've mentioned, Councillor Wicks, if you try to stick to 3 minutes, that would be helpful.
Good evening. Is that working? Yeah. I'd like to start by saying that South Darley Parish Council unanimously support the objections of the local residents who are opposed to this application. Planning Committee members should have received an email directly from Robin Green expressing serious concerns about ground stability. And at the very least, South Darley Parish Council would urge you to demand a proper independent geological site investigation before this application goes any further. As to our other concerns, this development will encroach onto open countryside and will be highly visible and totally out of character. With a 10-metre frontage at a high elevation, it will dominate the landscape rather than sit within it. And this is demonstrated by thorn trees further along the road, if you're familiar with that, an application that incidentally got passed without going to Planning Committee. The local plan restricts new development in open countryside unless it is essential. This is not essential development. A highly desirable property with amazing views could be built on the existing footprint of the old bungalow and within the western settlement boundary. The existing bungalow was originally only approved as part of a small holding and in recent years has been used as an allotment and for keeping bees. Can a small holding really be classified as brownfield to justify this extensive development? The only beneficiary of this development is the applicant at considerable cost to immediate neighbours and to all who live in South Darley and the Matlock area. Oker sits in a beautiful area and it is the responsibility of the Planning Committee to protect the local environment for residents and visitors alike. To this end, there are many policies in the To this end, there are many policies in the local plan that seek to protect the character of the Derbyshire Dales. Development is required, I quote, to respect the character, identity and context of the landscape and to resist development that will be detrimental to the character of the local landscape. These are all valid reasons for which the Planning Committee could support the local community by rejecting this application. We are surprised that this has been recommended for approval by the planning officer when previous cases indicate a consistent approach on the part of Derbyshire Dales District Council in rejecting developments that encroach on the countryside and are out of scale. South Darley Parish Council urged the Planning Committee to restrict this application to the current footprint of the existing bungalow and therefore ensure compliance with their own planning policy safeguards, policies that are designed to prevent inappropriate developments such as this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wicks. And I'd say to you and all those speaking that our planning officers will do their best to respond to any relevant comments which you make. Our next speaker then is, put my glasses on, Mr. Paul Watts, who's a local resident from Oker. Paul, you've also got 3 minutes, please.
Yeah. Good evening. As noted, my name is Paul Watts, and together with my wife, I'm the owner of Okerside, the neighbouring property. I will highlight 3 key issues in the officer's report that, in my opinion, require serious reconsideration. Firstly, encroachment and scale. The proposed dwelling extends onto land historically used for agriculture and outside the lawful curtilage of Longridge. Policies S4, PD5 and HC7 require replacement dwellings to remain within the established curtilage. Having lived next to Longridge for 33 years, I confirm the proposed site has consistently been used as small holdings and allotments, not as part of the residential curtilage. This is supported by evidence presented, but the officer's report ignores. Further, over 90% of Derbyshire Dales approved redevelopment applications in the last 15 years adhered to the original curtilage, underscoring the critical role in protecting rural landscapes. Approving this application would set a harmful precedent. The proposed dwelling is some 2.5 times larger than the existing bungalow, introducing a disproportionate structure into the landscape. Policies PD1 and HC7E require developments to respect the scale and character of their surroundings. Deferring these concerns to reserved matters stage bypasses a vital outline stage decision and risks enabling excessive development. Our independent planning consultant, Ian McHugh, formerly head of planning at a neighbouring authority, states, "I disagree with the conclusion reached by the officer. The proposed dwelling will clearly encroach into the countryside beyond the confines of existing dwellings. It will be highly visible when viewed from Oker Road and have an unacceptable urbanising impact on the rural setting of the settlement. In my opinion, any replacement dwelling should be on the site of the existing property." Secondly, risk of intensified development. Separating the existing large garage from the new dwelling raises concerns it could become a future holiday let. This violates policy HC7B, which prohibits replacement dwellings for increasing the number of residential units on site. The officer's report fails to address this risk. Thirdly, geotechnical risk. The site is in a landscape-prone area, as classified as high risk by the British Geological Society. Policies PD9 and NPPF paragraph 174 require land stability to be confirmed before approval, yet the phase 1 site investigation recommendation has been ignored. Okerside faced severe foundation issues during construction, and consequently the applicant and I are bound by a legal framework of support, meaning development must not comprise land stability. These are not reserved matters. They are fundamental to the feasibility of the site development. In conclusion, we respectfully ask the committee to reject this application as it introduces unresolved risks and policy conflicts that must be addressed now and not deferred. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Our third speaker, Mrs. Elaine Green. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Elaine, and I live in the house opposite the proposed new access and development. We've lived happily there for 34 years, and we've known the previous occupant of Longridge all that time and are still friends. I still visit her in her care home. I had the allotment and kept bees in an old hen run in her field, which I had to terrace due to the steepness of the site. This is where part of the 4-bedroomed house is proposed to be built. I dispute paragraph 7.3 in the planner's report, as the bungalow is not in decent condition. It has large gaps in the soffits, and internally there have been large cracks in the end of the bedroom wall, which you could put your fingers in. They have been frequently filled as the property continued to move. Because of damage, the previous owner was paid out from her insurers around 40 years ago. She was a lady of limited means and could not afford to do the repairs or rebuild that which was required. It has remained uninsurable. She stayed because of the lovely views and her garden and her happy memories there with her husband. The applicant paid a price for the property and the garage as a building plot only. All the neighbours are happy for the bungalow to be replaced. The issues are where it's to be placed and the size. Access, as proposed, is directly opposite my gate and garden wall in the narrowest and steepest part of Wilshaws Lane. We are concerned about turning in and out, especially with the long wheelbase vehicles and in freezing, icy conditions. It would be positively dangerous and putting my boundary walls at risk. Also, the right of the applicant to the proposed access has still to be ratified under licence from the highways because she doesn't own it. How is the sustainable drainage system going to work effectively in an area of known landslip? This could seriously aggravate soil movement and further landslip. It's very irritating reading the planner's report. 4+ pages of taking care of bats, birds, badgers and trees. And as an aside, the applicant has already cut down the largest trees before making the application. And tree trunks are still on site, and all the environmental reports have been done by the applicant's own firm, of which she is a senior director. But there is only half a page on all the objections and representations received from local people who have genuine worries about the impact on their properties and how this application raises a great deal of questions that the applicant would prefer not to answer at this time. It's all so unnecessary. There is a better alternative, simply by using the existing garage and the existing access, and have a light, sympathetic approach to rebuilding on the existing footprint. I urge this planning committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Green. I'm now going to ask the relevant planning officer, Edward Walden, who's going to introduce the application, respond, I think, to some of the points made, and to give reasons for his recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. So this is outline planning permission sought for a replacement dwelling with access and layout detailed at this stage, and all other matters are reserved at this time. So the site consists of an existing detached bungalow with a deep rectangular plot located on the west side of Wilshaws Lane in Oker. The site is located within the open countryside. Policy S4 of the local plan sets out that replacement dwellings in the open countryside are acceptable in principle, subject to compliance with policy HC7 of the local plan. In this case, the officer's report covers assessing the proposal against the criteria within policy HC7 and is considered to comply on that basis. Oker itself lies within an area of well-wooded pastoral landscape of small organic woodlands that is based on the characterisation given within the landscape and design supplementary planning document. The proposed replacement dwelling would be sited further back into the plot. Turning to the next slide. So these actually show off some photos of the existing site at the moment. So that's the existing garage on the right-hand side there, and there's a current pedestrian access to the existing bungalow, which is seen there. This is facing towards Wilshaws Lane. And then this is the western edge of the site. And then this is facing southeast towards the neighbouring property to the southeast, Oker side. And then that is south again. And then this is the site plan. So the proposed replacement dwelling area will be sited further back in the plot than the existing dwelling. So it'll be west of the existing dwelling. A new vehicle access is proposed effectively in the siting of the existing pedestrian access to the existing plot. It's proposed to serve the dwelling along with a detached garage building, which is sited approximately where the existing dwelling is. The proposed vehicle access has been reviewed by the local highway authority and is deemed acceptable based on the demonstrations that their gradient limits are achievable on that basis. So local highway authority have no objections to the access, which is a consideration at this time. It is acknowledged that the dwelling will be set back from the building, building line, notably more than the existing dwelling. However, this isn't considered at this stage to result in any inherent adverse impacts on the carriage of the area, considering this is an outline application with layout and access considered at this time, and scale, appearance and landscaping are all to be considered at a reserved matters stage. So it's very much subject to those detailed designs in terms of delivering a dwelling that will respect the character of the area at that point. On that basis, it's considered there's sufficient space on site to construct a scheme with this proposed layout in a manner that that can be in keeping with the character of the area and provides sufficient outdoor amenity space for future occupiers. In terms of neighbour amenity, the proposed dwelling will be sited in proximity to Oker side primarily, which is to the southeast of the proposed siting. It's approximately 10 to 12 metres away from the boundary with Oker side, and Oker side sits quite close to the boundary of Longridge. It's considered feasible to deliver a dwelling with this layout in a manner that wouldn't result in significant impacts. That again is very much subject to the detailed design stage. Again, I should stress that the council would reserve the right to assess and also refuse any detailed design it would consider unacceptable at that stage. It very much depends on the detailed design in terms of scale and appearance and any landscaping that would be required in order to make sure that the relationship is acceptable. But it's deemed that it is feasible to make an acceptable relationship in this case. An arboricultural assessment has been submitted, which indicates that a large mature ash tree, as well as a series of other smaller trees, are proposed for removal. The large tree removal due to safety, and the smaller trees removed to provide vehicle access, respectively. The council's tree officers review the plan and is satisfied with the proposed tree assessment in that regard. Conditions are recommended securing a tree protection plan and for safeguarding any retained trees, and then furthermore landscaping is to be assessed at the reserve matters stage. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust has reviewed the preliminary ecological appraisal that was carried out and have set out a series of conditions to ensure the appraisal safeguards protected species throughout the development. And the proposal is to deliver a self-built dwelling, meaning it is exempt from the mandatory 10% biodiversity requirement. However, nevertheless, there are opportunities to provide biodiversity enhancements and secure an appropriate landscaping scheme at the reserve matters stage as well. With regard to flooding and drainage, the site is located in flood zone 1, meaning it has a relatively low risk of flooding from rivers and sea. In terms of drainage, a sustainable drainage system is proposed for disposing of surface water, which will be secured and brought forward as part of any reserve matters application. That's secured as part of the condition within the officer's report. Concerns have been raised regarding land stability on the site, and Oker and its surroundings have been subject to historic landslip events. And it's evident this does put constraints on the use of land within this area. But this proposal is for a replacement dwelling, albeit in a different siting within the plot. The actual use of the site won't be changing from its existing use in that regard. In terms of scale, and appearance, and in terms of the means of construction, those are all to be considered at the reserve matters stage. At this stage, we are talking about the siting of the buildings and also the principle of siting them there. This is based on the principle of a replacement dwelling in that regard, as considering there's an existing dwelling there. With that in mind, I mean, there are indicative plans that have been provided by the applicant, which shows off an example of how it could be implemented, which does involve a sort of cut and fill of the ground to provide a level surface. So the council does retain the opportunity to review those proposals in detail at the reserve matters stage, and also to ensure that they would not have any significant impact on ground instability. And we can discuss any conditions that may be required to make that happen. Overall, the proposal is considered to comply with the local plan overall, and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions and also subject to the detailed designs to be provided at the reserve matters stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. It's now over to questions from members around the table. If you could, as usual, limit yourself to 3 questions each, that would be helpful. Councillor Slack, you are first.
Thank you, Chair. You just spoke about the second stage where you'll decide on the size of the bungalow. Is that correct? So there's not the size it could be reduced slightly, could it? Or it's entirely in your hands, like, yeah. So it's not a foregone conclusion.
So at this stage specifically, we're dealing with the principle of the replacement dwelling, the access, and the definition of layout in the legislation is, to quote it, is the way in which buildings, routes and open spaces are provided, situated and orientated in relation to each other and to buildings and spaces outside of the development. So in effect, the site plan that's put forward, the positioning and the orientation of buildings, that is subject to a decision by this committee effectively. The reserve matters stage would deal with more detailed matters such as the scale, appearance and the actual landscaping at that stage.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Peacock.
Can I just ask what the council's policy is on developments in areas where landslip is a possibility? Do we require, so in the same way that we require a response from the Wildlife Trust, is there anybody that we would go to pass that when it comes to the next stage? I mean,
through you, Chair, we can go to County Council in terms of discussing potential land instabilities with them. In terms of our local policy, PD9 talks about, sorry, do you mind if I get the policy reference up? It's a matter of effectively ensuring that land uses don't result in adverse impacts on land stability. Let me just check the exact wording. So it says, to quote, the district council will ensure that sites are suitable for their proposed use, taking account of ground conditions and land instability. In terms of how that operates in practice, there's wider national guidance in terms of elements that the planning authority can require, and it talks about how that process can fit into other processes, such as those through building regulations, who will also, in terms of building control, they will also be required to approve the actual construction beforehand to make sure it's actually safe to construct in the format that they've put forward. So we are within our right to request things such as a land stability risk assessment. I've considered it on this basis, based on this specific proposal for a replacement dwelling. I think it's appropriate that we can provide that at the reserve matters stage, considering that the matters such as the scale and the appearance and the actual massing of the construction is yet to be considered. And in terms of their precise exercise in terms of levelling the land and the landscaping around that, that's technically not up for consideration at this time. So there's still an opportunity for those to be subject to change, and at that stage, we could very well request them to provide a risk assessment and set out that the changes that they're making won't result in any sort of undue risk effectively towards land instability in that sense.
Councillor Buttle.
Thank you. I have two questions, really. The first one would be, you mentioned in 7.3 that a previous planning application had been granted for an extension of the bungalow that's sitting there currently. Was that like 2.5 times the size of the existing one, or was it just a small extension? Was there any particular reason why these people would have chosen to demolish and extend into the countryside, or would it be, is it a question of their preference for the view? I'm just wondering, why are they not using this existing planning permission?
Through each, the extension, I believe, was granted sometime in the 1990s. It was more a case of the exercise that it's required to be demonstrated within policy HC7 for replacement dwellings requires that the residential use has not been abandoned and the existing use as a dwelling is lawful. So it's primarily in demonstrating that the council had previously granted extensions to the dwelling, and in order for it to do that, it would have to first accept that there was a dwelling there in the first place to be extended. So it was a mechanism to demonstrate that the dwelling is an established one. It's been there for some time.
I see what you're saying there. I think that's probably all. The second question was, could they have extended again? Could they have extended upwards? Would it have been a permitted development if they built on the existing floor plan, as it were? Do they actually need planning permission to put a larger house there?
They would need planning permission to build a replacement dwelling of any sort. In terms of going upwards, that would require, at the very least, prior approval. That's assuming that the plot has permitted development rights, which, as far as I'm aware, it does. I don't have any record in front of me that suggests it doesn't. But in any case, providing an upward extension would still require prior approval and review from the council in terms of assessing design and amenity at the very least.
Thank you.
Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Going along Councillor Peacock's line really here on this one. If we didn't have a geological survey at this point, have we then missed the opportunity to have one when it comes to the second phase? Is one question. And we haven't seen the elevation of I know it's an indicative plan that we saw yesterday of it being cut into the bank, but to my way of how I looked at it yesterday, it looked like it was going to be cut into that bank probably 1.5 metres. Is that about, would it be far wrong at that? Thank you.
Through each, so in terms of addressing the first question relating to the timing of checking for geological information, I think because there's details effectively yet to be confirmed in terms of the actual means of construction and the actual scale of the dwelling proposed, I don't think the council still has an opportunity to review at the reserve matter stage, and also no work can commence on site until the reserve matters are granted at that point as well. In terms of the measurements of the cut and fill exercise and the indicative plans, I don't have the measurements in front of me for those. But as I say, it's subject to change as to the levels which they might want to set out. It depends on. It may well indeed depend on a preliminary geological exercise that's undertaken before confirming whether that scale of building is actually going to work in that location.
Yeah, thank you. It just looks as, when you look at the plan on the right hand side of the screen there, it looks as it's nearly up to first floor level, which is quite a big cut in the bank. And of course, the wider the building is, either the more it goes out or the more it goes in. So thank you.
Just to follow up Councillor Lee's question there, are you suggesting that it could be possible to condition any approval such that a geological stability survey is carried out in association with the reserve matters?
Yes, I would, Chair, yes.
Councillor Archer.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Peacock and Councillor Lees's questions and your clarification have covered what I was going to ask about, so I no longer have a question. Thank you.
Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I think for clarity, I'd like to ask the case officer to just explain exactly what would be considered at reserved matter stage, and I think maybe some of us around this table are wondering why this was accepted as an outline application, and could we have asked for it to be a full application so that all the details we would be aware of and make a judgment about.
Through you, Chair. In terms of this, requiring them for it to be a full application, it's not something that the council can't require it ipso facto to be a full application. There's the reason for the outline process in our planning system allows for the details to be submitted at a later stage. And it partly actually, for example, in this case, because the dwelling is a self-build one, and it's a case of the applicant having a primary say on the design. That it's very often the case that the developers may want to establish the principal development and any other important matters first. In this case, we did call in layout at the early stage of the process because it was evident that was going to be an important consideration at this stage. That was an early decision made, I believe, within 30. It has to be within 30 days of receiving the application. So that was made to ensure that the assessment had a full accounting effectively of how the layout would impact on character and amenity and also the principle in general as well. But broadly speaking, we can't effectively require developers to come with a full application.
And another question, if I may, Chair. Could you just explain policy PD9 to us, which, as far as I understand it, states that sites are suitable, ensures that sites are suitable, taking into account land instability. So how have we applied that one in this case?
Through you, Chair. So it talks about the suitability of their proposed use. So in this case, the proposed use is a dwelling, and the existing site has a dwelling on it. Appreciate it is in a different siting, but effectively the proposed use of the plot and the application site isn't significantly changing from the existing circumstances. Effectively, the policy is scoped such that it deals with potentially very large changes in land use. So it may well be the case that in other circumstances, more information may be required in terms of the impact of a use more generally. But in this case, the actual use of the site isn't particularly changing from the existing circumstances, considering it's a replacement dwelling.
Councillor Linthwaite.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, because I'm still new at this. Am I right in thinking that with a replacement building application, the applicant has the option to re-site a new building within their plot? They haven't got to use the same footprint or orientation or as before?
Through you, Chair. That's correct. In fact, I will, pulling up my report, I can read out the exact criteria that policy HC7 has in terms of the requirements for a replacement dwelling. So the residential use has to not be abandoned. The existing use as a dwelling has to be lawful. The number of dwelling units on the site has to not be increased. And then the existing dwelling needs to not have effectively a positive contribution to the landscape. That's protecting from replacing existing, perhaps older, hard to maintain, but positively contributing buildings. And then criteria E relates to ensuring that replacement buildings don't detract from setting or surroundings. That relates to our wider policy on character. And then it also requires that the existing dwelling is not a caravan or a mobile home, which isn't relevant in this case, and that the existing dwelling is demolished as well. That's all the criteria in policy HC7, and then if it complies with those, then it's acceptable under S4 as well, under criterion I for residential development.
Thank you.
Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. One of the speakers mentioned lawful curtilage. Could I ask, is that a consideration that we should bear in mind? Is it correct? And if it is it a material consideration?
Through you, Chair. So I had received representations about there being a history of using part of the site for allotments. As far as I'm aware, the siting of the proposed dwelling in any case is within, at the time of my visit, is within residential curtilage, and based on the site visit that was undertaken as well, that appeared to be within a residential garden and within the curtilage as well, effectively on that basis. Curtilage is an assessment that can be made effectively on the ground and is a matter of fact and degree in that sense.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Following up on the point of what is a replacement dwelling, we're replacing a house with a house and a garage. We're not knocking down the garage. Is the garage part of the dwelling? And if so, why isn't the garage having to be replaced? Knocked down. Say that knocking down the garage would give a better turning circle off the lane and therefore improve access.
Through you, Chair. So in terms of, it relates to, I guess, in my position would be that the garage itself, it isn't a dwelling, it's effectively an ancillary or incidental building to a dwelling in that sense. In terms of proposing a new garage within it, it would be similar to considering it as its own full application in terms of how we deal with extensions and new buildings within residential curtilages in that regard. And it's not something the policy comments on in terms of demolishing any sort of ancillary or incidental buildings associated with a particular dwelling.
So I think we're having cake and eating it. We're going to have, we're defining the replacement as the house, but not the garage, but then we're going to build another building as a replacement as a new building, but under a replacement policy. That doesn't seem to make sense.
So the principle relates primarily to the new dwelling itself rather than the garage. In terms of the principle for the garage itself, arguably you can take the same principle of if it was just the dwelling under this application and then later on an application was made to consider the garage in itself, that would be assessed effectively under extension policies in any case, and typically our RS4 policy covers extensions and outbuildings associated with residential properties in that regard. So the provision of a new garage in that sense would, as far as I'm concerned, wouldn't have any significant impact in that position and would be accepted in principle in any case. So I from a principle point of view, I don't think it affects the outcome of the assessment in that regard.
Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. Will the reserved matters come back to committee, and can we condition that they do come back to committee for further consideration? Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair, if I may. In short, the reserved matters doesn't have to come back to committee unless it's requested by one of yourselves. Obviously, on material planning grounds for it to come back to committee, and unfortunately, no authority can condition a subsequent separate application, the reserved matters in this case, to be referred back to the committee for the same consideration. It has to be called in or referred by the officer or the development manager.
Councillor Butler, you wanted to come back with a further question.
I did. I was thinking, it was something I was thinking about before Peter Dobbs mentioned it, was about the history of the land and whether or not what we're getting here is a bit of urban sprawl, no, rural sprawl, through buying an allotment and then moving your house onto it. Do we know if that's what's happened?
Through you, Chair. To my knowledge, in terms of assessing the application and also carrying out a site visit as well, in terms of the positioning of where the dwelling is, the proposed dwelling, that was all cited within within an established residential garden. In terms of when I've carried out multiple site visits in that sense, and that portion of the site is in a garden area. And so in terms of it being curtilage, that's effectively a matter that's assessed on the ground in that regard. And there wasn't anything on site that indicated to me that there was any sort of distinction in that particular area. There is a further element of the site that goes even further to the southwest and west further, but that part of the proposal isn't subject to the development here. In terms of the location plan, if I go back to it, so there is a wider blue line boundary as well. I appreciate it's a bit small, so you might not be able to see it easily, but the red line boundary is sort of within a portion of the site, and there is a further element of the site further west of the proposal as well. So I can't speak to that element in terms of whether that falls in the curtilage as well, but in any case, that part is not subject to this application as well.
I guess I'm going to have to say thank you. I think it might have been something we could have found out a little bit more about, but if we don't have the information, we don't have the information. Thank you.
If there's no further questions, we're going to move into debate now. We have a recommendation from our officer for approval. There's been a suggestion that we might add one or more conditions to that. But to have a debate, we now need a motion from the floor, please, either to accept the recommendation or an alternative. Mr. Beaufort.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My proposal is that we refuse this application. I think there are far too many concerns that are going to be considered at reserve matters, particularly scale design and, most importantly, siting. I think the issue of land stability has to be taken really seriously, and I'm not convinced that it has been so far. What we can do about that, I don't know. But the main reason I would quote as my reason for recommending refusal comes under policy HC7, which states that replacement dwelling houses outside defined settlement development limits will only be permitted where all of the following criteria are met. And I would suggest that under that, E, the scale, form, design and massing of the replacement dwelling does not detract from the character or appearance of its setting or surroundings. It's my view, having been on site and seeing the area, that it certainly does that. It's in open countryside. We saw that behind the proposed siting of the building, we've got quite a dense area of trees that's part of that rural landscape of Oker. So for those reasons, I am prepared to propose refusal of this application.
Does anyone wish to second that? Councillor Lees?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair. I totally agree with Councillor Burford, what she says about this application. I think moving it across the site, it's going to put it in a very dominant position on the landscape. And I do think it will have an impact on the character of the surrounding area. So I second it. Thank you.
Right, I'm now going to adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes.
Before you do, can I add something?
You can ask a question or ask for information.
Make a request to the proposer and seconder, and that is that we quote PD 9 and concerns about the suitability of development on the site given the conditions of the land and the possibility of landslip, and that needs to be addressed before we do anything.
Councillor Burfoot, are you happy to? I'm going to adjourn the meeting to ask you and Councillor Lees to discuss your proposal with the planning officers and our legal representative, given this is an outline application. But would you be happy to consider Councillor Hughes' additional reason for refusal?
I would most definitely, yeah.
Well, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes initially till 7 o'clock. If I could ask the mover and seconder to
Yeah, I've got it down 6:55.
Well, we'll just wait for Councillor Murphy to return, then we'll... Oh, you're there, Dermot. Are you? Right, the committee is now back in session, and I'm going to ask the Development Manager, Sean Robson, to report the outcome of the discussions.
I mean, we've formed some advice to the members, but obviously this is a member recommendation, so I think it's probably best if Councillor Burfoot runs through the reason for refusal.
If that's okay, Chair. So the recommendation remains for refusal in that it's considered that this application is considered to fail on policy PD1 in that the development does not contribute positively to the area's character, history and identity in terms of the proposed layout. We're suggesting, Councillor Lees and I, that the other suggestion from Councillor Hughes is not now included.
Would you like to elaborate on why, Sue? And why Councillor Hughes' suggestion?
Yeah, I can elaborate why, and that is that it's the PD9 isn't specific enough in terms of our requirement for surveys of stability, and therefore it wouldn't be sensible at this stage to include it.
Okay, that's fine. Before we move into a debate, would, for the benefit of myself and colleagues, would either Sean Robson or Kerry Franson like to make any comment? Don't have to, but if you'd like to.
I have no comment to make, Councillor.
Councillor, the only comment that I would like to make is that the current option on the table is going against officers' recommendation. So just bear that in mind as you deliberate and when you're forming any decisions. Thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. I apologise to members of the public for that long delay, but we now have a proposal moved and seconded that the application is refused for the reasons which were elaborated by Councillor Burfoot and Councillor Lees. Would any members like to contribute to the debates? Councillor Buttle?
Could I just ask that the reasons were repeated to me because I didn't get a chance to note them?
Who would like to...
Apologies, I need to find my piece of paper, which I now can't find. I've got it, haven't I? Somewhere. You don't want another adjournment, do we?
Chair, can I make my comment while Sue's trying to find it?
You may, Councillor Dobbs, yes.
I would just like to comment that I think this application is an enormously tricky one, and I actually thought that Edward's report and the way he sort of tiptoed through some very difficult matters was entirely commendable. There are issues that are concerning, and I think probably if the committee had been minded to, we might have addressed them at the reserved matter stage. But
in a sense, refusing at this stage is part of a precautionary principle, and I think possibly what will emerge in a new application could be a better application. I can see, I think, many reasons why the applicant has chosen to do what he has done. I can see the advantages, I can see the difficulties with rebuilding on the same footprint, but something will come forward, and hopefully we will have a house. We don't want to lose a property, lose a home, because we sort of prevent sensible application of our local plan. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Archer.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to reiterate a bit what Councillor Dobbs said, really, I thought it was a really impressive report by the officer, really thorough, really detailed. I wasn't on the site visit, and I really appreciated the level of detail and the quality of the responses to questions. So I'd just like to thank the officer for that. Having not been on the site visit, I think it's such a complicated application. I was inclined, sort of likely to abstain anyway. I'm not really going to change my view, but I wanted to just thank the officer for what was a very thorough report, which really gave me a good insight. But I think it was one of those I did need to be on site visit to make a firm view, so I'm likely to abstain just to make my position clear.
Really sorry, but I'm going to. We know what we want to say, don't we, Councillor Hughes? But I need to just get. I don't know where that's gone. I'm going to have to ask you in adjournment just for a few minutes.
Yes, just to aid my mind, it's related to non-compliance or a view that it doesn't proposal doesn't comply with policy HC7, which is the one which specifically details the terms under which replacement dwellings are allowed. So perhaps if we could adjourn for a couple of minutes where someone could find the detailed policy HC7 and Councillor Burfoot could... Sorry, PD1, was it?
I do want to, Chair, I do want to get the wording correct. And as I say, it is against the advice of, this recommendation is against the advice of the officers. So we've been very careful as to what the recommendation is. But somewhere along the line, my piece of paper has got missing. So.
Well, you take your time. So take your bundle of paper and take your bundles. And this, it was one of your little scribes here. It'll be on one of these. Right,
So,
we're back
yeah.
on stream. Council meetings, committee meetings aren't always as interesting as this. But
So many apologies, honestly, for delaying it even further by losing this piece of paper, and still can't find it. So done it again. So I'm recommending refusal on this application. It's considered that the development fails on policy PD1 in that the development does not contribute positively to the area's character, history and identity in terms of its layout. Put that safe.
Councillor Hughes, that accords with your recollection of.
Yes, for the third time, Chair. Yeah, it's exactly as written.
Right, do we have any further contributions in the debate before we move to a vote? No, okay. We have a. Now, is everyone now fully aware of the proposal to refuse and the reasons put forward by Councillor Burfoot, seconded by Councillor Lees, and to which our officers have not indicated that they have any substantive reason that it should not be agreed by this committee, if that's the wish of the committee. All those in favour of the proposal as put forward to refuse, please show them. All those who are against the proposal. And those who wish to abstain. Thank you. Could you read out the result, Angela, please?
Or abstain.
That motion is therefore carried and the application is refused for the reasons stated. Right, we now move on to item 5.3. This is an application in Doveridge, or just outside Doveridge. It's an application by the Doveridge Clay Sports Club for an erection of a new clubhouse. We've no late representations for this application, but we do have a speaker. We do have the agent for the applicant, Mr. Justin Stevenson. So, Justin, if you would like to address the committee, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Members and officers, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. The shooting ground at Doveridge was established over 40 years ago, and the existing clubhouse built approximately 30 years ago. The shooting ground is over 60 acres and is used for clay pigeon shooting. A diverse range of clay pigeon shooting is catered for, from English sporting to Olympic skeet shooting. Mr. and Mrs. Phillimore's recent acquisition of the shooting ground will build upon the reputation established by the Bramley family. Mr. and Mrs. Phillimore's purchase enables the next phase of investment to improve and update the facilities. Mr. Phillimore is an entrepreneur with a proven track record of establishing and running successful businesses. However, while the shooting ground is a business, Mr. and Mrs. Phillimore are keen shots, and it is a project close to their hearts. As you saw yesterday, the site is at the foot of the rising ground to the east, providing a well-screened site for the new clubhouse overlooking the English and Olympic skeet shooting range. The building will be clad in natural timber with a juniper green coloured roof. As we set out in the application, the sporting ground is of regional significance, being one of only 4 Premier Plus grounds in the West Midlands. New clubhouse will improve facilities for members and visitors to the site and allow space for training courses. The training areas will allow training of gun safety and certification, as well as allowing a greater emphasis on sports science for athletes competing at the highest level of competition. The applicant's vision is for Doveridge to become a centre of excellence for clay pigeon shooting. It is important to note that this application does not increase the shooting capacity at the ground. The new clubhouse will allow a greater range and depth of services to complement the existing shooting ground and ensure its long-term viability. Sport England has supported the application, and the applicants have secured the agreement of the GB Olympic skeet shooting team to undertake all their training at Doveridge once the clubhouse is completed. I thank the officers for working proactively with us to get this application before you tonight. If approved, the new clubhouse will be constructed this spring, ensuring it is available for Olympic team training this summer. This application will bring new investments to the shooting ground and generate revenue for local businesses such as pubs, restaurants and hotels, from visitors to the shooting ground and for those businesses supplying the clubhouse. The application will sustain the 14 existing jobs at the shooting ground and generate new jobs once the clubhouse is complete. Draft planning conditions have been agreed that will ensure the building is constructed to a BREEAM rating of very good and that the statutory biodiversity net gain requirement will be met. As you've seen from the officer's report, the application is supported by policies in the MPPF, local and neighbourhood plans. Your officer has recommended approval. I encourage you to support your officer and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. I'm now going to ask our Planning Officer, Edward Fordin, to introduce the application. Edward.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a full planning permission sought for a new clubhouse at the Doveridge Clay Sports Club at Eaton Hall Farm on Upwards Road. So the club site includes an existing clubhouse, 7 skeet towers and associated soft and hard landscaping, and the siting of the proposed clubhouses within the open countryside. Policy S4 of the local plan sets out that development associated with sports and recreational use are acceptable in principle if they are in accessible locations and in the least environmentally sensitive locations. Policy HC 17 permits the provision of new sports, cultural, leisure and recreational facilities provided they are connected to the existing facilities, meet specific rural needs that cannot be met within settlements, are accessible, and that they will not adversely impact on character and not unacceptable in terms of impact on amenity. So the proposed clubhouse relates to the existing Clay Sports Club, which, due to the nature of the sport, requires facilities that cannot reasonably be provided within settlement boundaries. The club itself hosts a range of large events throughout the year, with many of the events hosting between 150 and 300 people per day. The club is one of 20 Premier Plus shooting grounds within England and is the only Premier Plus ground in Derbyshire. That's based on the Clay Shooting Association in terms of providing high quality facilities for clay pigeon shooting. The existing clubhouse is approximately 300 square metres in footprint. Considering the size of many of the events on the site, the existing arrangements are considered insufficient to provide appropriate indoor event space for the club. The NPPF states that planning decisions should enable sustainable rural tourism and leisure developments which respect the character of the countryside, and furthermore requires decisions to recognise that in order to do that and meet local needs in rural areas, sites may well have to be sited beyond existing settlements and in locations not well served by public transport as well. Policies EC1 and EC8 both encourage effectively intensification and more efficient use of existing sites, and specifically in terms of enhancing existing recreational facilities. Turning to this, these are some photographs of the existing site. Those are the ski towers there. That's looking south, I believe. That's looking up towards the area of hard standing where the proposed clubhouse will be. It's a bit difficult to see from the slides, but effectively the backdrop of trees, the sort of foremost backdrop of trees is where the clubhouse would be sited. So the clubhouse would sit effectively against that backdrop. And further sort of left in the left portion of the image is the existing clubhouse, which is sort of a small building that was built, granted permission I think in 1987. And this is that's the existing clubhouse there and the car park associated with it as well. These are the proposed elevations of the new clubhouse. So it's a larger building than the existing clubhouse on site, but it consists of a shallow pitch gable-ended building with cedar timber-clad walls and a green composite metal profile sheeting with large glazed elements on the principal elevation. So whilst it is relatively large in scale, the topography and the setting of it allows it to be well screened amongst its surroundings, and also it would mean that effectively its visibility from the wider surroundings would be limited, and the impact on the landscape as a whole would not be significant in that sense. On the wider grounds, there is Eaton Hall Farmhouse, which is about 250, 300 metres north of the proposed clubhouse, which is a Grade 2 listed building. However, the proposed clubhouse will be sited, as I said, approximately 250 metres away, and also set down as the access slopes and curves down away from the listed building. So it's not considered to result in any harm to that listed building setting or significance. So overall, the proposal isn't considered to have any significant impact on the character of the area. In terms of amenity, it's set within the existing shooting ground, and it's not within proximity to any residential dwellings. The nearest ones are about 250, 300 metres away, again to the north near Eaton Hall Farm itself. And again, those are set amongst and associated with the existing shooting grounds. And it's not considered the clubhouse will increase noise or result in any amenity issues above and beyond the baseline of the existing site. The local highway authority have raised no objections to the proposal. The proposal will provide B&G by creating an area of mixed scrub to the northeast within the wider grounds of the farm, effectively. And this will be secured by conditions including a habitat management and monitoring plan. In terms of climate change, in line with policy PD7, there's a condition recommended to secure that the building achieves a BREEAM very good standard as a minimum. Overall, it's considered the proposal complies with the local plan and is recommended for approval. In terms of looking through this, some further plans here of the elevations, that's the floor plan there in terms of giving space for events. It also includes a gunsmith and gun shop as well, all associated with the facilities as well. Those are the proposed plans. I'll bring it back to the location plan there. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Now moving to questions, and David, Councillor Hughes, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. This is a detailed question. So, I mean, when we were there yesterday, I hadn't noticed that about car parking, and I've looked on the portal to look at where car parking is going to be for this, and I'm not sure quite where it is. I was wondering if you could explain how much car parking space there will be, given that it's a fairly big clubhouse and it's going to be used for quite large events, I would think, and you'd expect a lot of visitors.
Through you, Chair. In terms of the car parking, so my understanding is they'll be provided through the existing car parking on site. I do have a photograph of it here. So the site has a relatively large car park. It's not proposed to sort of increase the wider amount of activity necessarily at the shooting ground. This is primarily to provide more indoor space for this facility, for the club in that sense. The club does already host quite large events, so as actually you can just about see in the photo, they often have, in terms of the clubhouse, they often have to provide effectively a gazebo extension to it for temporary purposes, just to site that number of people. So in terms of car parking, it's not something the higher authority have deemed to be an issue inherent to the clubhouse. They believe that the wider club grounds itself can facilitate that.
All right, thank you very much.
And just as a follow-up to that, Edward, does that imply that users of the facility could in fact park adjacent to the proposed new clubhouse? Would that require a separate consent?
There's no specific proposals for parking directly outside of the clubhouse. The actual location plan itself puts the red line boundary squarely around the building itself. So, I mean, there is existing hard standing there and an existing access, for which on the site visit we did sort of drive down. So there is existing hard standing available, and so there is potential provision there, but it's not, the higher authority haven't deemed there to be any need to provide sort of any formal new car parking down by the siting of the new clubhouse.
I don't think it's so much what the highway requirement is, it's the way the parking contributes to the appearance of the site, I think. It's whether, as I said, whether parking would be, people would be able to park at will in the vicinity of the new clubhouse without an explicit consent, planning consent. See what David and I are getting at.
I think I understand, yes. In terms of whether they'd need consent, I believe, in terms of effectively providing sort of formal car parking. As I say, that's not proposed here. I mean, I don't think there's anything that would necessarily prevent anyone parking by the clubhouse, but I don't envisage that that's something that they would encourage necessarily, particularly because it's in relatively closer proximity to the skeet towers. It's also there is also a public right of way that runs alongside where the proposed clubhouse is as well. It runs through the site. So, to my knowledge, I don't think it's something that would be encouraged or something that's proposed for the wider management of the club.
Okay, Councillor Hughes, you wanted to come back?
Yes, Chair. I was thinking about disabled access from the car park to the clubhouse, and is the car park on a different level, and is it very far away? Otherwise, would it be possible for us to condition that there were disabled parking spaces nearer to the clubhouse that they could be used by?
Through you, Chair. So, in terms of the actual measurements between here, the proposal and the new clubhouse, I must confess I don't have the exact measurements, but I would suggest that it's no more than about 100 metres, I think, in terms of the actual distance between the sort of start of the car park, where the existing car park, and the proposed new clubhouse. There's an existing access between the two, so there'd be provision for level access, effectively, in terms of disabled persons being able to be effectively delivered directly to the clubhouse. In terms of disabled persons parking, if that was something the Highway Authority recommended, that would be something I would have pursued. But in this case, it's not something they put forward as a recommendation.
Chair, can I suggest that we need to condition that disabled parking is provided because of the Equalities Act? I mean, we should be doing something in our best endeavours to satisfy the need of disabled users, and peoples with disabilities do shoot, and I wouldn't like to make it difficult for them to do so.
I think we'll take that as a rhetorical question. We'll come on to that as a proposal. Yeah. Any further questions, colleagues? Okay, we'll move into debate, and we have a recommendation to approve. You've heard a comment from Councillor Hughes here.
Chair, well, I'd like to move that we take officers' recommendations, but with the proviso that we also have a condition that disabled parking is provided at the same level and reasonably close to the clubhouse. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that, Councillor Slack?
Yes, I'll second that, Chair. I think it's this plan is really great, and clay shooting's becoming very popular in the Olympic Games. We're doing very well, and I'm very pleased that it's not. I'm against blood sports, so I'm pleased clay shooting's taking off and been a success. And you've got my full backing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Any further comments? Councillor Boynton.
Chair, I'd just like to add, I've seen the shooting club grow from its inception. It does provide employment for the village, and since its inception it's had excellent relationships with the village of Doveridge, and I'm quite happy to go along with all the recommendations. There's very rarely any issues that develop from the shooting ground being there, and if there are any issues, they're keenly looked at and dealt with by the club itself. I'm sure that will continue under the new management.
Thank you, John, for those words of encouragement. Any further comments from colleagues? No, in that case we'll move to a vote. I would say I would support Councillor Hughes's proposal because those who weren't on the site visit yesterday, if you look at the plan on the screen there, the existing car park is it's the top side of the existing clubhouse. So the top side, and you can see where the new clubhouse is. So it is in fact some distance to walk from the existing car park to the new car park. So I think it's eminently sensible that we make a provision for disabled parking adjacent to the new facility. Councillor Burfoot, you wanted to?
Yeah, just to say, if we are going to condition disabled parking spaces, should we condition how many?
Chair, are there national standards for ratios between car parking spaces and disabled parking spaces?
It'd be difficult for me to comment on that because we're not the highway authority. That's a difficulty, I'm afraid.
I would like to suggest that we do under consultation with the Highways Authority in that case.
Yep, that's fine. Councillor Slack?
Yeah, I think officers should talk to the applicants and then they can agree the car parking spaces. That's the easiest way to do it. Officers talk to the applicant.
I think officers have got the message, and I think with this condition that we can move forward. All those in favour of the proposal with the additional conditional, please show. And I take that as unanimous, so thank you. And we look forward to medals coming home from Los Angeles in 2028. If not, we want to know why. Next item. The next item is at Wash Green in Wirksworth. This is for the demolition of some existing lock-up garages and the erection of 3 dwellings, 1 house and 2 flats. We have some additional information from our officers, which I'd ask us members just to take 3 or 4 minutes to look through before I invite Kathleen Ward to speak to the application. There's obviously quite a lot to take in there, but I think it's helpful information, and I'm sure Sarah Alban will refer to it when she presents the application. Can I invite Kathleen Ward, who's patiently waited for a couple of hours now, to address the committee? Kathleen, you've got, I know you're nervous, but don't be. You've got 3 minutes, please.
It won't take 3 minutes. My name's Kathleen Ward. As just said, the garages that are going to be demolished and replaced with a car park are the boundary walls of 29, 30 and 31 Kingatewood Street, where myself, Carol Lazell, who's with me, Charlotte Phillips and Daniel Henshaw are away at the moment. Our properties, which are our properties, the back walls of the garages are built with red brick, which we think should remain the same. Reasons being that our gardens are all at different levels from the ground level of the garages. Some are higher and mine's lower. The wooden fence, which is proposed to be the boundary between the car park and our gardens, will not be suitable to retain the different levels. When speaking to Simon Henderson, I spoke to him yesterday, he was on site and saw the garages from both sides, our sides, and then realised that our gardens are higher and lower than the level of the car park, the garages that's going to be a car park. We also think that a wall will be safer than a fence in case of any form of vehicle causing damage, as the car park is directly behind our gardens and it's higher. We could have a car in our garden. So I think if this permission is granted, it should be granted with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. I think you'll find that our planning officer is going to address those points in the next couple of minutes. So, Sarah, across to you, if you could introduce the application, please.
Right, obviously you've read all the late reps. The main point is that the Wildlife Trust have given a response. I didn't have that in time for when the report was published. So that's helpful in that they're now proposing conditions. They've accepted that there isn't a BNG requirement and that they would just like to gain as much in terms of the landscaping scheme on site as that is achievable. So therefore, you know, in the late reps, there's additional conditions to secure the landscaping scheme, its implementation and maintenance. Maintenance that would include the stream that's in the red line boundary. If I go through, this is the site here. The garages are shown, and as the neighbours said, all the garages are right on the boundaries of the properties gardens. So obviously the red line is the application site. The blue line land is in the ownership of the district council. The district council have made the application, hence the reason it's got to be determined at committee. Part of the site is owned by platform housing, and that's the element where the section where the access is and the garages. The rest of the site is owned by ourselves as the district council. The site is a rural exception site, so it's for affordable properties, which part of the site is in the settlement boundary, part is outside of it. But as I say, there's a principle for residential development as an exception site because it is affordable housing. So it's proposed two one-bed flats and one two-bed house, all for affordable rent. And the need for the need is for this type of accommodation is evidenced in the submitted housing needs statement, which indicates there's an unmet need within Wirksworth. As you can see on those elevations, it's going to look like a pair of semi-detached dwellings, and that's considered to be in context with the vernacular of the area. You probably saw that on site. They're stone properties. They utilise the land levels of the site by stepping up, and the lower property is sort of it's got a reduced width and lower eaves and ridge, to accentuate that. So, as I said, the dwellings will be stone-faced on the front and side elevations, so anything that's visible from the street that obviously was within the conservation area. To conclude, the removal of the garages is considered to have a positive effect on this part of the conservation area, and the dwellings are not considered to have a negative impact on its special character. Turning to the retaining walls, if I go back, obviously there was discussion had before our site meeting yesterday. The agent met with the neighbour and looked at the land level differences, etc. So what was suggested is that we change the wording of condition 7, which is what I've put in late reps. So we're not approving the details on the site plan in terms of boundary treatments. That is to be determined at a later date by the submission of discharge of conditions, simply because there are retaining structures that needs investigation, and it's something that we could look at as to having a wall instead of a fence. So that's what's suggested here. The other thing in terms of late reps is, in order to secure the affordable housing, obviously we're the planning authority, but obviously the Director of Housing made the application, they're the applicant. So it's how we secure, what's the mechanism for securing that affordable housing in perpetuity, and that would be, it may not be a 106. So I was suggesting to change the resolution to read, to approve subject to conditions outlined above, and in section 8, and with a legal mechanism to secure and safeguard the 3 dwellings as affordable units, with delegated authority to the Director of Place and Economy to approve any amendments to those conditions as deemed necessary. So the wording is just to have a legal mechanism rather than stating a 106. Happy to take any questions.
Right, any questions, colleagues? At this stage? No, that was obviously a very clear presentation, Sarah. Thank you for that. No. Move into debate. Councillor Stack, you wishing to move a recommendation?
Yes, Chair, I'll move the recommendation. I think it's I'm glad we've come through that one with the fence, so it will be in the application. Yeah, I'm pleased that affordable housing, we need affordable housing, and it's a right scheme to do on this property, so I'm fully behind the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Do we find a seconder, Councillor Dobbs?
Happy to second. I think it's a great improvement, and 3 affordable properties. What's not to like?
Do we have any further contributions? No, so we'll move to a vote. We're voting on the recommendation to approve with the amendments read out to us by Planning Officer Sarah Arbon relating to condition 7 and the recommendation related to ensuring that the properties are retained as affordable in perpetuity. All those in favour, please show. And that is unanimous, so thank you for that, and we look forward to these being built as soon as possible, I hope. Right, our final application this evening. This is...
Chair, before we can, I've got a point of order, really. We, on the previous application, the Clay Sports Club at Eaton Hall Farm, just recalled that, having read that previous late representation, that there was an officer report update. The question I have is, have we agreed in passing, in approving the officer recommendations, have we included the officer recommendations actually listed in this addendum?
Well, I'll ask Edward to comment on it. I do apologise to everyone. The piece of paper in front of me had the representations in a different order, and it had that the Doveridge Clay Sports Club after the previous application.
Yeah, exactly.
So
That's what I've got footstacked.
I apologise for that.
Chair, would it be beneficial for me to take members through the update effectively?
Bearing in mind we've actually approved the application, but let's respond to Councillor Hughes' query, please.
In terms of what the update was, it was effectively it was additional comments provided by DWT to include effectively a standardised wording for a detailed lighting condition. That's primarily for in the interest of safeguarding against light pollution for bats, effectively. So it was that, and also in responding to their finalised list of conditions, it included a couple of modifications to condition 6, which just relates to biodiversity enhancements. It's a slight change in terms of the exact wording of the enhancements they requested. The resolution itself, in any case, does allow for amendments to those conditions as well. Other than that, there was one late representation from a member of the public that was received on the 10th of January, which talks about it related to traffic issues, effectively relating to the wider use of the shooting club, and it did suggest that the applicant effectively explores developing the access using the right of way from Eaton Hall via Eaton, Dovedale, and Sedsall to the Rochester Road at Cumbridge. That was the essence of their representation. Of course, in terms of determining the application, or building my recommendation, there weren't any objections from the higher authority on that matter, and also this representation didn't pertain specifically to the proposed clubhouse, more a point of the wider use of the site in any case. But that's the late representations that were associated with that item.
Chair, thank you very much. Chair, in that case, I would like to just clarify that when I moved it, I also included this and I moved officer recommendations. I also included the additional conditions here. Can that be taken as read, or do we have a problem?
Okay, I need you. I'm sorry, this is a point of order here, but we'll just make sure we're doing things according to the book. Kerry, do you want to comment on that? Are we happy with that? So it was my responsibility for not making reference to the additional representations at the appropriate time.
Through you, Chair, if I could, please. The recommendation that was agreed was to grant permission subject to conditions are set up below, the delegated authority to the Director of Place and Economy to approve any amendments to those conditions as deemed necessary. So that will allow scope for that to be included. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. That was helpful. Right, our final planning application is item 5.5. This is a change of use application of the former post office and store in High Street in Doveridge. Just for the avoidance of doubt, there is an officer update here. Perhaps we could take a nanosecond to read it. Now, we have two speakers here. Our first speaker is Linda Priestley. She's down as a local resident. She's also actually the applicant here. Linda, would you like to come up and address the committee, please?
Good evening. My name is Linda Priestley, owner of 26 High Street, previously Doveridge Village Stores and Post Office. The business closed on the 28th of June 2024. The remuneration from the post office has been decreasing steadily, and at the time of closure was significantly less than when we took it on over 20 years ago. The main business from the post office was home shopping returns, for which we were remunerated at 3p per parcel, irrespective of size. So 100 parcels would bring in £30, and we were legally bound to keep in a safe and secure place. The post office contributed nothing towards electricity, rent, salaries or insurance costs, despite occupying a large area of floor space. As mentioned in the report, post offices are closing at the rate of 2 per month as they are no longer viable or sustainable. The food crisis has meant that customers are looking to get the best price for all their goods, and as a result, very little was spent on other goods at our store. We could not compete. The world has changed and times have also therefore changed. People wanting a shop and using a shop are very different. There is a limited population of 1,760 as of the 2021 census, and although there have been 2 large housing developments established over the last few years, this has had little impact on business. There is no passing trade. Since the closure of the shop, newspapers can be delivered from a source in nearby Sudbury, and milk can be delivered by a local dairy. At the December meeting of the Parish Council, the application was discussed and no one spoke against it, and the majority spoke in favour. The Parish Council decided unanimously not to submit any comments, and a statement was published by the Chair of the Parish Council to inform residents. The statement also informed residents that they have contracted with a local business to site a vending machine located at the village hall. This will supply milk, milkshakes, butter, honey, hot drinks, cakes, sweets, and other items by virtue of a vending machine, which I believe has been successful in other villages. This is scheduled for operation in the first quarter of 2025. There is also a pop-up tea coffee shop in the village hall, and a Saturday breakfast is also available at the village hall. Again, as portrayed in the report, the business was not viable or sustainable, and indeed we have ploughed a substantial amount of our own funds to try to keep the facility open, but could no longer do so. The building was first and foremost a house many years ago, and part was utilised to form a post office and antiques establishment. It was later extended at the front and converted to a village store and post office. The original house structure is clearly visible on both the interior and exterior and shown on the plans. We wish to regain the original format of the dwelling, which is our home. We are offering a quarter of the original floor space, some 30 square metres, for use as a community shop. I hope you will understand the choices that we have been compelled to make and grant approval to our application. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, very much. Our next speaker is the agent for the application, Jim Malkin. Jim, as agent, if you need, you have up to 5 minutes to address committee.
Thank you, Chair. Right, good evening, members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of our client's application. Just for clarity on the description, this is not an independent dwelling. This will be included as part of the existing dwelling to the rear. It's not an application for a new dwelling. We've worked closely with your officers from an initial pre-application submission through to the application that's in front of you today. We're delighted that the officer's report recommends approval for this application, which will allow the applicant to make best use of the property, whilst also ensuring that space is made available for a community shop in the village. The critical policies in relation to the application are HC 15 of the local plan and CF1 of the Doveridge neighbourhood plan, which relate to community assets and facilities. Your officer's report and Mrs Priestley's address to this committee have outlined the decline in the shop over recent years to such a degree that a retail space at the scale of the existing facility is not viable. Doveridge is located within 3 miles of 5 major supermarkets, all of which are within a 5-minute drive of Uttoxeter, as well as offering convenient delivery options. In addition, the large 24/7 Asda convenience store, petrol station and fast food outlets adjacent to the A50 even closer. There's also the well-stocked farm shop at Denston. The village shop has suffered due to this relationship and the plethora of cheaper alternative retail opportunities in close proximity to the village. It's the applicant's intention that a quarter of the floor space, some 30 metres squared, will be retained in retail use, and it's planned that this will operate as a small community shop, subject to appropriate operators being found. And discussions have already been undertaken with representatives of the Parish Council in relation to this. Further marketing of the retained element of retail space will commence following the hopeful approval of this planning application tonight. Mrs Priestley and her family have supported the village in operating the shop and post office for over 20 years. and it is now their intention to make best use of the property they own, whilst also seeking to ensure that an appropriate area of retail space is made available and retained in the village. There were three criteria of policy HC15, and as set out by your officer, compliance is required of either criterions A and C or B and C. The scheme exhibits clear compliance with criterion A, as evidence has been provided that the level of existing retail floor space is no longer needed to serve the needs of the community, whilst compliance with criterion C is provided through the offer of retained floor space to the community, an offer that will be formalised again, hopefully following the approval of this application this evening. It's therefore clear that in principle the scheme complies with all the relevant requirements of all local and national planning policies. The proposal does not result in any significant external alterations to the building and therefore will not harm the character and appearance of the conservation area or wider street scene. No issues are raised in relation to neighbour amenity, whilst there are no concerns with regards to highway safety, as confirmed by the response of County Council Highways. Thank you for your time. We hope that you're able to follow your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission for this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was very helpful. Now I'm going to hand over to Sarah Arbon, who's going to introduce the application and the reason for her recommendation. Sarah.
Okay, that's the building there, and obviously it's an existing dwelling with, all the shop and post office attached as extensions to the existing dwelling. It's clear that we're not looking at an additional dwelling here. It's just the floor space, some of the retail floor space would be subsumed in the existing dwelling. So the post office closed in June 2024, about 6 months ago. Application seeks to change some of the retail and community floor space to residential, as I've said, to be part of the existing dwelling, and 30 square metres retained in a retail shop use stroke local community use. Obviously, we went in and stood in that area. And in terms of the policy that you assess it against, it is the Communities, Facilities and Services policy, where it talks of when the development is resulting in a loss of a community asset, a source or facility, it needs to demonstrate the points that I made, that it makes in the policy, evidence that it's no longer needed to serve the community, existing facility is no longer viable, with evidence in the form of marketing for a 12-month period, or the use has been offered to the community for the acquisition or operation at a realistic price. So either way, its criteria C is relevant. So this is not a loss, it's a reduction of, it would retain a retail stroke community use floor space, and what we're doing is seeking to secure that retained floor space by condition 3, and adequate evidence would have to be supplied if an application were to remove that condition. So what I'm saying is, if in the future it continues to be vacant, they would have to pass the tests of marketing at a realistic price, offering it to the community, and give us evidence in which to do that, in which to review removal of that condition. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions from colleagues? No, we had to move into a debate. Then we have a recommendation to approve, and I think Sarah's explained the context of this application very. I would say that a number of us live in communities where we do have community shops, and they can be very successful in meeting the needs of residents who either don't want to jump into their car or who don't have the ability to jump into a car. So I think it's important that this this facility, the option of having this facility is retained as in the recommendation. Councillor Boynton.
Yes, Chair. I'd like to move the officer's recommendations. Sorry, for approval. I've seen the shop increase in its business, hence the need for the extensions at the time. I've also seen it recently decrease, and I think it would be the right decision to allow part of this shop to go back to residential use. I am very pleased that part of it is hopefully retained for retail, should the village want to take it over as a community shop. The opportunity is still there for that to happen. But times have changed, as has been said. There are the supermarkets there. Use of the shop did go down. I think it's fair to say that the village of Doveridge itself has diversified, and alternative arrangements have already been made for most of the things that residents needed from the shop, including the social side with the pop-up cafes that have opened up now three times a week. The vending machine, which is proposed, which is hopefully going ahead. So I think this would be the right decision to reduce the size of the shop. It must be very difficult to make something that size financially viable these days, and we retain part of it for village use as a shop. So my recommendation is to go with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, John. It's always good to have the support of a local member for officer recommendations. Councillor Hughes, did you want to second?
Yes, Chair, I can second this.
You wish to speak?
No, I think Councillor Boynton said it all, really.
That's good. Councillor Peacock.
Well, I was going to offer to propose or second, just because I know. So I live in a village that did have a shop of about 30 metres squared, and it was great. But our shop did close down. I understand, but we can't force somebody to continue making a loss-making business. So I think we should approve it.
Thank you, Lucy. Councillor Dobbs.
Just going to comment, I think that actually the strategy that's been developed is a very sensible one. To be perfectly honest, 30 square metres is not very much, and this is perhaps a foresight of what we're going to see next for that little bit on the side that is being retained for commercial use. But yes, I'm fully in favour of this. Thank you, Chair.
Any further comments? Councillor Buttle.
Well, again, another person with a community shop in their village, well, Lytton in this case, and I went in today just to check how big it was. It was about 40 square metres, so it's probably doable, and I wish the community well in Doveridge.
Thank you, Neil. I'm sure that'd be helpful advice to Doveridge. Right, that's just a comment for myself as chair. I mean, it's as we know, we have a number of quite significant planning applications for new residential development in Doveridge and similar villages, and I think it would be nice if those developers were willing to make some sort of contribution to support community facilities, whether they be community shops or vending machines or pop-up cafes. So I think that's something we might think about when we come to look at these sorts of quite significant planning applications. Right, we have a proposal to approve, moved and seconded. Can we have all those in favour, please show? And that is unanimous, so that application change of use is approved. Right, our final application this evening is to receive the appeals progress report. Sean, I don't know whether you want to make any reference to anything specific there.
Nothing, Chair, just obviously there's a couple of decisions attached which are quite good outcomes, but apart from that, nothing. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Councillor Hughes.
Chair, yes, Holland Hall, this was an application to put solar panels on peripheral buildings to a Grade 2 listed building, and the inspector and I think our planning officers agreed that the peripheral buildings were actually should be taken as being part of the Grade 2 listed building, and therefore refused solar panels, the addition of solar panels on those buildings. And I'm a bit concerned about this, given our requirement to reduce carbon emissions and the need to do what we can. And here was somebody who wanted to put solar panels on a building, and we've turned them down. And I feel that a different result might have happened if this had come before the planning committee. And therefore, my question is, could this be resubmitted at no cost to the applicant for discussion and decision made by the planning committee?
I think my comment would be it is open to members to ask that applications are brought forward to committee. So I think we need, as members, we need to be alert to this sort of situation. I guess if there's no intimation that the application might be refused, perhaps members don't feel the need to bring it to committee, but it is something to bear in mind. But Sean, I think I'd ask you to respond to Councillor Hughes' question, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. Through you. In terms of a resubmission, the applicant would have to make it fundamentally, different to what they've had previously. Were they to submit the identical application again, then we can, and we probably even choose to as an authority, because there's been a recent appeal decision, we would refuse to validate that, and we could actually maintain that line for a year. That is part of the Planning Act, Section 70, I believe it is, or 72 of the Planning Act, that basically means the authority does not have to, or a authority, not just ourselves, does not have to accept that application if there's been a recent appeal decision of a similar nature of development. So it would have to be quite significantly different.
I think the question Councillor Hughes was asking, A is, would any application be free of planning fee? And would it make any difference if this was a delegated decision? I think inference is that there may have been a different decision. There may have been a different decision had it come to this committee. Would you like to comment on
Yes, in terms of the planning fee, the secondary application, primary application, list of building consent, that's devoid of any planning fee, other than what they may have to produce in terms of the supporting information and drawings. In terms of the full application, given the fact that, as I mentioned, because of the recent appeal decision, the time frame from which to submit that would probably be timed out by the time they could submit that and make it a valid proposal. So, again, I can't speak on behalf of the applicant. I can't really advise them directly. I've got nothing in front of me to advise on. However, they may well want to choose to consider their position, get their information together, documentation together, and then come in for the application once that period has lapsed.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Do I have someone who move receipt of this appeals progress report? Councillor Hughes? Seconded by Councillor Dobbs. Any further questions or points? No. All those in favour, please show. And that is unanimous, so that is approved. And that concludes our meeting for this evening. That's not too bad. 4 applications in 2.5 hours. And thank you, Madge, for putting up